people don't realize how much the cost of demoing an entire building is. It's extraordinarily expensive. If you can renovate that building without having to do that full demo, you can then reinvest that money back into the school.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Lapoetica Richardson, and I am here today to interview some of the candidates that we have running for this current election here in the city of Peabody. Today we have with us
Ryan Melville, Councillor at Large. I'm an incumbent. I've been on the city council since I was elected in 2017.
Okay.
And I've been on the city council since 2018.
That's
I'm running for re-election. It'll be my fourth term.
And how do you feel about things that you've accomplished so far? Can you name some of your accomplishments as a city councilor at large?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been very active since I've been on the council. I was on the legal affairs. I was chair of the legal affairs committee in 2019 through 2020. We had a number of items come through there. One of them is going to be updating all the city's ordinances, which will be coming before the council soon. We had a number of.
Job.
Well, we have a contractor that comes in, but it's something that working with the city clerk and my colleagues. I've been working hard on. The big thing that I've been kind of really involved in and taking up a lot of my time is updating the city's charter.
Okay.
I was city council president in 2022, throughout 2022, and that was a priority. We're still working through it to this day. There's a number of items in there. There's some language in our current charter that is, out of date and really isn't appropriate for a functioning city. Most cities update their charter every 20 or 30 years. Right. The city of Peabody's been operating on the same charter since our inception in 1917. So there's some elements of that doesn't incorporate like women with the ability to vote, things of that nature. Really is not appropriate to have in there. And I have to say, my colleagues on the council have been fantastic in working through this. We're taking a very deliberative approach to it. We're not just doing it, having a meeting, there's a good idea, let's move forward with it. We've had a consultant that came in and gave us a draft. The council is working through that draft. The council has been fantastic with questions. We're working with our assistant city solicitor on those, along with the administration. And it's been a really interesting experience. So we're really reworking some parts of the city government. I think for the most part, there's not going to be any serious changes, but it's going to have a modern city government organization. So that's been doing a lot of that. Along with that, I'm a veteran myself, been very active in a number of different.
What branch?
I was in the Army.
Nice.
Yes, yep. So I've been working with veterans groups. Our veterans agent, Steve Patton, on implemented the veteran program that allows veterans to get rides to and from the VA facilities.
Is that funded by the city?
Well, it's a tax. So the drivers themselves will it will be deducted from their property taxes. So it's a great deal for those folks that are volunteering. And essentially, the cost of the driving and the time that they're doing would be deducted from their property taxes. I can tell you firsthand that when I was going to the Jamaica Plain VA, at least 3 occasions, I have seen the Peabody van in front of the VA facility. So that tells me that that's in practice and working. Actually, I just came from the veterans agent in Peabody, and somebody was dropping off the keys. So it's really an active. So I'm really proud of that program. But again,
what is the name of that initiative?
It's the Veterans Tax Abatement Program, and it basically volunteer tax abatement program. And you can talk to Steve Patton, anybody that's interested in it, the Veterans Office. And he can work with you on getting it. It's a really good example of, first of all my colleagues were in support of it. We had our veterans agent was very active in it, and it was just it's one of those feel good things that you do in government. Oftentimes we're dealing with issues where people have problems or that we're trying to solve, and this was a really good one where we could come together.
Definitely a feel good initiative.
Feel good, yeah. And it's having real results. People are benefiting from it. And I can tell you, I've seen it firsthand. It's very difficult to get to some of our VA hospitals, whether it be in Bedford or Jamaica Plain. Those are the most common places that folks are going from our area. And I can tell you the Jamaica Plain one, it's not easy to get there. Yeah. In Bedford, it's a lot of highway. And some of the folks that if you have to go to the hospital, if you're an older veteran, it's tougher to get there. So.
Yeah, absolutely. These sound like wonderful initiatives.
Yep.
Now, going back a little bit, circling back to the charter revision and review, in that process, is the community participating at all? Are the constituents of the community giving their input, suggestions, and things like
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah. So there was the origination of this came with there were some folks that were put a charter committee was put together of non-elected officials. So they were selected by the mayor's office and the council. A number of people applied for it. And those people were chosen to kind of develop this charter with this consultant.
Was this
All of the-
committee diverse and inclusive?
Yeah, it was open to anybody that wanted to apply for it. The actual review itself was open to the public, and all of our meetings have been open to the public. There will be a moment. So what's going to happen is we're not done with our review of it. We'll be reviewing it, and then it will go before the council, a public meeting essentially. If anybody has any questions or issues with it, they can bring those up. Ultimately, it will go to the legislature. The legislature will then vet it to make sure it follows state law. It'll come back to us, and then it goes before the voters.
Okay.
So the voters will have a say in it, and it will be available to us.
So ultimately, all of the changes are an overall.
The overall charter would have all
Okay.
those. All the changes that we're making are pretty standard to what city governments operate with today within state law. A lot of the stuff, if you look at our charter, you'll see little amendments currently, and those are all basically the state saying you can't do what you had in there or it's been outdated.
Okay.
So we're working our way through that to ensure that it's the most up-to-date version.
Okay. So amongst all the things that you've mentioned, what would you say would be perhaps the key project as a councilor at large, reelected? What would be the thing that you feel as a leader in this community is probably the thing that's plaguing this community the most?
Well, I think our schools, school buildings. So I think we have, I'm a product of the Peabody Public Schools, had an outstanding experience. I abut the Welch School. So if you were to ask me the thing currently going on that I'm the most proud of as a counselor, it would be the Welch School project. Okay. The Welch School is now going through a massive renovation.
Really?
And yes, overdue, just like a number of city schools need a lot of work. So, but this is a great example. What's happening at the Welch is a great example for other parts of other school buildings throughout the city, which is, it's not just to knock it down and rebuild it, it's a full renovation. And by doing that, we're able to, people don't realize how much the cost of demoing an entire building is. It's extraordinarily expensive. If you can renovate that building without having to do that full demo, you can then reinvest that money back into the school for, the software and hardware for a modern school. And the Welch School is a unique place. It's got a very diverse population. And
it sits on a pretty unique lot.
It does. It absolutely does. Yeah, I'm very familiar. And it's a beautiful area.
Absolutely.
But this project that's going on right now that will be done in November will basically give us a new Welch Elementary School. And I think that's going to be an example that we can use at our other schools, because frankly, we should never not, it took about 5 years for this project to kind of come to where it is today.
Okay.
So if you add that up to all the other school buildings, we should never not be renovating a school and within that workflow. Like, we should be consistently targeting and doing those as we go along.
I think from a nostalgia standpoint, it's also good to kind of preserve the overall outside, at least the outside shell of the building. For those of us that came up
definitely
in the city, it's definitely, like, I know the Carroll School. I have not been.
Yep.
But I heard that the Carroll School was completely renovated, completely done over.
It was rebuilt.
Rebuilt, yeah. And the same with the Higgins. The Higgins is not anything like what it used to be.
Correct.
So.
And this Higgins is an example of a full demo and a rebuild. I think that as great as those are, we were able, I'll give you a great example with the Welch. The city had to make a decision on having basically modular classrooms brought in, or having 2 grades basically be spread out throughout the rest of the city. The decision was to spread those 2 grades out because we took the $2 million that was going to be needed for modular classrooms, and that was re-put into the school. So now we have a media center. We have an updated, it's a really fantastic project. It's something to feel good about, and I think that this is going to be the model going forward, which is why we need a new high school. And that's a major point of emphasis. If you ask me, like, what is one of the target things I'm looking at going forward, it's the high school. getting a project done up there.
Yeah.
Because it's necessary. It needs to happen. And for whatever reason, schools in the 60s and 70s and 80s might not have been built as well as they could have been built, and we're dealing with some of that today. The Higgins was obviously a school that didn't get your 100 years that you were hoping to get out of it.
Yeah.
But we're now in a position with the high school that we got to really look at that, and it's been a priority of a number of councilors. The council unanimously has approved putting that project before the Mass School Building Authority. So that is a priority for me going forward to continue to push for that.
It's beautiful to see those changes happening in the city. When I was in elementary school, I remember I was at the Carroll School.
Okay.
And it was right in that section of time where we were transitioning from the elementary schools, going from K to 8 to going to K to 5. And then the middle school used to be the junior high. And
okay, yep.
So I was looking at history, like reshaping back then. So to hear you speak of this now is beautiful. And I feel like a perfect example of recycling buildings is what used to be the original high school. It was right here on Central Street.
That's correct. Yes, exactly.
It's a senior home now.
And I had, that's a big point that I make to folks. If you don't rehab these buildings, so you're gonna either have to knock it down to fill the void of that school, or you're going to get, it's going to be transitioned into something else. And I can't tell you what that is. And I'd much rather those neighborhood schools be functioning in the way they are.
Absolutely.
And we're really making an effort. And I think if you haven't seen it, the Welch School Project is a great example of that.
I think, now where could people in the community find, maybe drawings, illustrations, examples of the Welch School Project?
There's a number of them. So that we've had a number of public meetings, so they're on YouTube. If there's a website that's established with that you can kind of follow it. And honestly, go for a walk up there. It's a nice area to go for a walk.
Yeah,
right now,
sure
there's a lot of construction going on around it, but a lot of folks play like softball, and there's pickleball courts up around there. So there's a lot going. The golf course is obviously not far from there, but it's a really nice place, and they're doing an outstanding job. Just keep it on schedule.
Sometimes decisions are put in front of you, and perhaps some information may be omitted, right? And you might not be completely informed. Do you feel there is anything in your history as a councilor at large in the city that you would have done differently? Any decision, any vote, and any particular, and if so, why?
Well, I think one thing I would encourage councilors, and it's something I learned from a councilor, which is to never say you'll never support something ever. You know what I mean? One of those things. So I think there's a couple examples that I would point to. One of them, I think we really do have to look back at the COVID and like shutting down schools. And I think that this has to happen at a local level, a state level, a federal level. That we have to look back at that time and see like what were the best practices that we could have done at that time. Should we have opened up City Hall and meetings earlier? Gotcha. But while also as council president, I worked with my colleagues, my fellow councilors, and we have like a hybrid council meetings so that people that can't get down to City Hall can participate in a city council meeting. And that's a really important thing. And so we've done a lot on that end, and that's the kind of things I look back on and I say, for specifically because I think COVID is something we haven't fully looked back on and understood that it's had such a major impact on us all, and I think I would encourage us as a community because we had a really great health director that she's done an outstanding job. It's to kind of listen, what's the best practices that came out of that, and were we too quick to say yes on some things, no on others? I really think that's important. So, and essentially, I try to treat every item that becomes before me is to just say, I'm never going to support that. I try to have an open mind at every meeting.
Now, let me ask you this. I guess you might not get this question often, but do you have social media? Are you active on your social media?
So it's funny. I follow social media, and I will post from time to time. So I see what's going on. I was actually randomly one of the first people ever on Facebook. So in 2004, when I was a freshman at UMass, Facebook was just becoming a thing, and you had to have a college email to get on it. And it was like UMass, BU, I want to say MIT, and a couple other schools. So it was like and then if people of my age would know this, when you signed up, it would tell you like, oh, you're the 10,000th person signed on. I remember being like that. So I've used it as a tool to kind of follow what's going on, to communicate from folks. I get a lot of direct messages from folks about issues.
Constituents?
Yeah, constituents.
So
yeah.
constituents can reach out to you
Oh,
through
definitely.
Facebook.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Or they can call me. My phone number's everywhere. So
Okay.
and I do get that before I came in here. It was
So
one of
for
things I
those
was called.
listening,
Yes, you
our
can always
wonderful
reach out.
counselor at large can be, you can reach out to him on his social media. And it would be great as just an example and follow up to this interview, if you could post the links to those videos on the Welsh School Project
Oh, absolutely.
on your social media. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
I think people should definitely look into that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely it's part of that. We have these public meetings. Anybody can call in or actually participate in them and then watch them. That'd be great. But yeah, so I pay attention to what's going on. I encourage some folks. It's easier for them to call about an issue. Than they posting. Some of the stuff is pretty personal, or it could be some. So we do run into some of that. But yeah, I'm always available.
That's great to know. Thank you for your time today, Counselor.
Absolutely, Michelle. Thank you
It was a
very much
pleasure
for having
meeting
me.
you.